And welcome to another recording of the Content Marketing Studio. We're back with another season to help you create better content faster. I am your host, Pascal Fintoni, and I'm joined today by leadership, change management, and team building expert, Michelle McArthur. Michelle, welcome to the Content Marketing Studio.
Good to be here.
No, absolutely. You're taking part in a mini series called Invest in Yourself. At a time where obviously things are a little, more difficult for all of us. Let me ask you quickly, where are you and how are you doing at this moment in time?
I'm actually in Wakefield in West Yorkshire. And how am I doing? I'm doing okay considering the situation with everything that's going on. Yeah, I've got a good team and yes, life's good.
Super. So you're joining us today to talk a lot about what you work on, this idea of healthy mental well-being, increasing your resilience, but as a result of which increasing your productivity. For viewers and listeners, Michelle is the founding partner of Jigsaw at Work. You're also the creator of the Jigsaw Discovery Tool. We'll talk about this in a moment in time. But you tell us and many others that you love seeing individuals release their inner potential through healthier and smarter brain-based working practices. So could I begin with that one? What are the smarter, healthier, brain-based working practices?
Okay. Well, it actually all starts with it's proven that, and when I say proven, I'm talking about neuroscience, brain science, okay? And over the last, I first came into kind of brain science back in 2008 was my first, shall we say, introduction to it. And so what I talk about really is everything that's kind of come through since 2008 up to the today, shall we say. And what we've found is that if people understand a little bit about how their mind, their brain works, without consciously thinking about it, they tend to work in a more brain-friendly way. So one of the things, again, that has kind of come to light is that a lot of management practices, the way that we lead and manage our teams, etc., in the UK, in our organisations, actually goes back to management practices that date back to the 1950s, 60s. And the workplace is obviously a very different place. And back in the 50s and 60s, it was our bodies that used to wear out because it was much more manual work. Now it's obviously much more mental work, and it's our brains that work our brains, we overload our brains. And so we've got to start and think about how we can work better with our brain. In a more smarter and more brain-friendly kind of way. And that's really where my passion is. It's about helping people to understand just the basics, the simples. And some people get a little bit frightened and think that I'm going to go into very deep science, etc. I'm not a scientist myself. It's all layman's terms. It's all analogies and things like that that I tend to use. But just by having that brief understanding of how the mind works actually helps us to actually work in a smarter, friendlier way to our brain.
No, and I love the sound of this because, of course, the work that I do is just to help somebody find ways to communicate via the internet, and as a result to which come up with good content ideas, and then have the motivation, the energy, enthusiasm to execute on that. A lot of it is brain based, and am I hearing that you'd like us to be therefore kinder to ourselves and to our brains by extension?
Yeah, kind of showing more compassion to ourselves and other people. And one of the challenges, and certainly for more senior managers in organisations, is because they spend so much of their time focusing on the results, the bottom line, the strategies, then the brain, they don't actually spend that much time thinking about themselves. The way the brain works, it's made up of all these, what I call, well, they're called neural pathways. But if you imagine the brain is a little bit like a roadmap with thousands and thousands of roads going. Imagine it a map of the UK, all the roads, the A roads, the motorways, the B roads, etc., and down to the dirt tracks. And the stronger the actual neural pathway, the more we actually use it, the stronger it becomes, the bigger it becomes. So then the pathways that we actually use the most, the things that we focus on, they become the equivalent of like a superhighway, compared to a neural pathway that we rarely use is nothing more than like a dirt track, shall we say. And more senior people, and again, evidence shows us this, more senior people, what they do, they tend to spend so much time focused on, as I say, the outcomes, the results, the strategy, spend very little time focusing on themselves. Therefore, that pathway, that roadway, is nothing more than a dirt track. So that's why sometimes we see leaders as being lacking in compassion, and they don't seem to get that people aspect of things. And that's one of the big things that we talk about a lot nowadays in leadership programs, is we need to start to show that compassion, to show real empathy. And to develop real empathy, we need to start by having an interest in people. And this can be very difficult, although it's very easy to do, we would say. It's actually very difficult for somebody who, for the last 10, 20 plus years, has been focused on bottom line strategy and results and outcomes, etc. So that's one of the things that very much we should start to show ourselves some more compassion, be kinder to ourselves, because it's really, really important. And especially when you're talking about creating content, etc., that the brain is relaxed. And I always say to people, where are you actually when you have your best ideas? You're probably not sitting at your desk. Most people have the best ideas in the shower, walking the dog, anywhere, but actually in the workplace. And that's a lot to do with the fact that the brain is more open, it's more relaxed. When the brain is relaxed, we can be creative. When the brain is under pressure, it starts to close down. And one of the things, the way that the brain actually works is when we start to feel under pressure, our body goes into fight or flight. That then starts to, our emotional brain takes over, and it closes down our cognitive thinking. So it's very difficult, if you like, using kind of modern language, our cognitive, logical thinking, rational, problem-solving brain goes offline. And until the mind again relaxes, then the emotional brain, which is not rational at all, that is actually in control. And so if we want to create great content, we've got to have a much more relaxed brain. So we need to start and think about more brain-friendly ways of working. A very simple thing that, it is so easy. Every 90 minutes, your brain needs a rest. And it tells you so because it says, I'm thirsty, or perhaps you yawn, or perhaps you want to go to the bathroom. But how often do we go, I'll just finish this and then? Yeah. And then 2 hours later, we haven't gone and got that cup of coffee or drink of water or whatever. And that's our brain's way of saying, look, I just need a break. And it just 1-2 minutes, that's all it takes. But that's one great, very simple way that we can start to work in a more brain-friendly way.
Do you know, that reminds me a bit of some of the earlier practices. I mean, certainly I've learned over the years to be better at leading teams and certainly to be kind to myself. But when we began our foray into content marketing, so it would be the mid 2000s, we still treated that as a job that needed to be done between 9 to 5. We didn't have breaks. And essentially, the break was a reward for finishing the task that you started a moment ago. So finish the article, then you can have a break. Finished this. And of course, sometimes you were working up against it, and I could tell that it was hard and it was laborious. It was not enjoyable, but I will finish the article and then I can have a rest.
Yeah. But were you doing your best work? That's the question. If you'd have got up when you kind of, I will finish this, that kind of real fighting, I am digging my heels in, I am going to finish it. If instead of doing that, you'd have said, do you know what? It's just not flowing at the moment. I'm just going to go out, walk the dog for 5 minutes, whatever. Come back in and sit down with a fresh, kind of refreshed brain. Actually, you'd have probably done it in a lot shorter time. And, it was no doubt good anyway, but it would be outstanding.
Thank you very much. But the concerns really that I have, and it sounds a strong term, but as I'm looking after my clients and their best interest, and right now we've been stuck, often in a sitting position at a computer, oddly working longer hours because of course we don't have the traveling times anymore, we don't have the lunch breaks with the colleagues, we don't have those rituals that actually sometimes would create the breaks, or the fact that the meeting rooms you book, someone knocks on the door, say my turn to have a meeting, so you have to stop. And And I'm finding now that, I mean, here we are months later where, yeah, I can tell that, my productivity, the quality of the work is being slightly eroded for sure.
It's really important that you do actually still have a routine. I mean, we actually started to see this pre-COVID when we were still all in our offices, etc. One of the examples that I used to use, and please don't hear that I am a promoter of smoking. I've never smoked in my life, but kind of the old days, as we say, then people used to smoke and we used to stop and take breaks to have a cigarette. That's all kind of declined, and a lot less people now smoke, but they haven't continued to take the break. They've just carried on working. And that's where this kind of, again, this 90 kind of minute rule, I think, is really, really important. And it's so easy these days. I mean, we're sitting at our computers. You can just set a reminder for 90 minutes. Or I wear a Fitbit, and every hour, actually, my Fitbit at 10 to the hour just pulses once or twice. Nobody else knows, but it means get up and move about a little bit to give the brain a rest. So there's simple little things that we can do to help us to remind ourselves to do that, but it really does impact on that productivity. The other thing, of course, is actually, I'm not saying we should work rigid because we're working at home. We should, be at our desk from 9 till 5 and not move, etc., etc. If it suits you to actually maybe be in your office at 7 o'clock in the morning and do a few hours, and then maybe take a few hours off early afternoon or something like that, and perhaps work a little later, well, that's fine. But you need to establish a routine. And one of the things I often say to people as well is it's really important that if you are working from home, to try and have, and I appreciate this isn't always possible for everybody, but if you can have a dedicated workspace, when you're at that space, you're working. And everybody else, because of course the other issue is a lot of people aren't home alone. There's other people in the house as well, perhaps also trying to work. And so it's a case of saying, look, this is my dedicated workspace. When I'm there, unless it's a real emergency, let me be, kind of thing. Let me, but then making sure that you take that time to move away from your workspace. So, I've done what I needed to do for today. I've got through my jobs list. Now it's my time. It's relaxation time. And it's really key that we take that time out for ourselves, going back to that compassion, showing that kindness to ourselves, making sure we build in time for ourselves every day.
No, you're absolutely right. So, can I ask you a question? Because I'm actually intrigued by the Jigsaw Discovery tool. How did you come up with the concept? What is it, and what does it help discover, I suppose?
Okay, all right. Well, actually, underpinning, again, according to science, the evidence is there, underpinning our well-being and performance is self-awareness, having that awareness, that understanding of ourselves. And part of that, and it is only one part of the self-awareness, but part of that is understanding our behavioural preferences, the way we all prefer to work, whether we prefer a kind of a louder, noisy type working environment. Do you like the radio on in the background, for example, or whether you prefer a quieter environment? Whether you're somebody who likes lots of details or somebody who just actually, I just want the headline of it and let me work the rest out for myself. These are all part of our behavioural preferences. And the Jigsaw tool is all about discovering your own behavioural preference. Because one of the things we know is that when we are working from a behavioural preference, then it uses an awful lot less energy than it does if we're working from a lesser preferred preference. And a very quick way that you can prove this to yourself is just actually write your name on a piece of paper and then swap hands and write your name with the wrong hand, as I'll call it, and see what that actually feels like. And it actually, you have to think about it, and it is much more draining on the energy, and the quality isn't anywhere as good usually for most people. So, and that's what working with a lesser preferred preference is doing to our brains all the time. It's much more draining on our energy. So it's really important that we understand and have this awareness of our behavioural preferences. How the Jigsaw tool came to be, there are many, many profiling tools out there. And the jigsaw, we actually created it, myself and my business partner. We created it about 20 years ago. And it came about quite simply because we were working at that time. Profiling tools tend to be paper based, but you'd have like 100 questions. Do you prefer tea or coffee? Well, actually, I don't prefer either. So how do I answer that question? Because you've got to provide an answer for each question. So it was forcing you to go one way and or the other. And we were working with people who were very literate kind of people, very used to words, but we found that giving them the 100 questions was actually quite intimidating for them. So I said to my partner, I'd love to find a different way of doing this. I went back and studied all the kind of original works. Most profiling tools are based on the work of Carl Jung, Swiss psychologist. And I went back to his original works, which was around the end of the 18th, early 19th century, and studied all that, put together, shall we say, a loose framework. I then started looking at everything that had, all the other theories around psychology, behavior, etc., and pulled together what is now the kind of the jigsaw behavioral framework. I then said to my partner, right, okay, you're the creative one out of the two of us. You go away, because I'm the theorist, the academic, he used to call me, and he was the creative one. And I said, right, you go away and find a way that we can actually use this framework, a profiling tool, a way of profiling people without asking questions. And it did take several months, I've got to admit. He used to come in the morning and say, I've got an idea. And I go, yeah. And I go, no, that won't work because. So he'd go away, and a few weeks later he'd come back in again. And one morning he came in and he said, I've really got it this time. So I said, go on. He said, we do it using jigsaws. And we started with sitting at home actually on an evening, cutting out pieces of jigsaw with a little pair of scissors and some card and making these jigsaws. And we never dreamt it would be what it is today, a globally licensed tool. And that's really how it all came to be. But people now, and we've actually got a digital version now, thanks to COVID. But people actually, up to March of this year, came into our workshops and were each given a 64-piece jigsaw that they then actually, through a process that we guided them through, they came up and built and created their own behavioural profile. And that's where they went on this kind of journey of discovery to understand more about themselves.
Oh, that's smashing. Thank you so much for that. Because as we are, moving forward as a society, as businesses across all industries, we are seeking, productivity. But I think we're going to probably reach the point where the tech can do as much as it can, and yeah, there's AI, there's machine learning, and so on, and maybe we're going to be actually coming back to ourselves, and I've seen, the results of a team where self-awareness has been applied through different means, and sometimes, frankly, just being good about people as well as, using tools. And I've seen the opposite side where I walk into an organization and the business of sales and marketing has become quite complex now. There's multiple disciplines working at the same time. But actually, from the face-to-face meetings all the way to the clever, post on Facebook, and you end up in a situation where a team leader is faced with actually individuals who have very different talents, very different working practices, and sometimes, frankly, very different what I call blogging clocks, where, as you mentioned a moment ago, someone will say, unless I can be free to do this at midnight tonight, I can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, this is, one of the challenges for leaders. And that is that traditionally, leaders and leadership, when I run a workshop, let's say aspiring leadership workshop or managers type workshop, we always look at the difference between leadership and management. And what we tend to find is that the majority of people, irrespective, and it's nothing to do with job titles, irrespective of whatever fancy job title they've got, they tend to spend by far the greatest amount of time actually managing rather than leading. Now, there are many reasons they do this. Some of it is down to the actual culture of organizations. And while the kind of the most senior people in an organization may well be all on board and saying, yeah, we've got to look after our people, we've got to show compassion, etc., etc. But then actually by 5 o'clock today, can you make sure that this, and this happens? And they put kind of operational pressures there. So what we tend to find is that people are tending to be doing more managing than actually leading. And one of the big things that we need to kind of change is that whole kind of thought process around leadership, is that a leader's job is to lead the people. They're not there to manage the task, to do the task. They're there to manage the people that actually do the task. And it's up to them to actually get the best out of people. And if we're going to get the best out of people, we've actually got to spend time with our people. We've got to know people as an individual. And I'm not saying that we need to know all the personal, intimate kind of details, but we need to know them as an individual. We need to be able to truly empathize with them. What's going on for that individual? Has John, has he got perhaps an elderly parent he's caring for? And so it's taking those things, really empathizing with him. What is the current situation of remote working, for example? What's that actually like for John, who's also got this elderly parent that he's caring for at home? He's perhaps got a young family as well, who this week anyway, when it's half term where I live, are maybe not at home. Are maybe at home, not at school. So you've got to look at individuals and really know them. And again, this is part of that, where something like the jigsaw, understanding people's behavioural preferences. Personally, I'm very much an introvert, so I'm quite happy actually during lockdown working at home. That's absolutely great for me. But there's other people, other people that I work with, it drives, they need to be out there, they need to be talking to people because they're more extroverts. So it's important that managers understand at this kind of level about their people. They actually know them that well. And then from there, you can actually start and kind of, it's building protocols for the people, giving people guidelines. It's about like communicating with them. And understanding about the communication. Yes, there's got to be formal communication. So we've got to have team meetings probably still and things like that. And they're the formal type of communications. There still needs to be those formal kind of one-to-ones. But we also need to have a mechanism where there's informal communication. When we used to be in the physical workspace, we'd come out of a meeting, we'd perhaps walk down the corridor with a colleague having a good old natter. It may be work related about something that's gone on in the meeting. It might be just personal stuff. But we've lost that now, because when I come off this Zoom call, I'm going to say, bye, Pascal, that's it, end of. There's no kind of natter off air, shall we say. And we miss that in the, now we're working remotely and we're not in those physical meetings anymore. So it's maybe just encouraging people, when the Zoom call's finished, ring up one of your colleagues and have a chat to them for a few minutes. Maybe having, drop-in coffee sessions. So 10 o'clock, if you want to come onto Zoom and have a coffee with, excuse me, with me at 10 o'clock, that's absolutely fine.
So when we think about what you just said, which is that now we're in a position where we are working remotely, have you done some work recently with clients where you've reminded them about those rituals and replaced them with the phone calls or the coffee break and so on? And have they come back to you and say, oh, thank you, you reminded us that, we can do better than just being stuck at the computer all day long, just doing Zoom calls?
Yeah, worked with a few different teams with different circumstances, again, and totally different personalities. Some people absolutely love the idea of being able to kind of have those informal sessions online. And some of them, one that I actually worked with, they set up, and on a Friday night, they have a drop-in wine bar session. And so they all kind of, those who want to. Now, the only thing there is we need to be a little bit careful, because it's not, again, it's not one glove, one size fits all kind of thing. Because for some people, actually, they might not like that type of thing. So we've got to make sure that, we don't end up with different cliques and that people feel left out and excluded. We've also got to make sure that people don't feel peer pressure that they must attend these things. So that's why it's really, really key to actually have a conversation with your team, sit down, or Zoom with your team, and actually say, okay, guys, how are we actually going to do this informal communication? What's going to work for us as a team? And just because the sales team are doing one thing and you're the marketing team doesn't mean to say you've got to do what the sales team does, or any other team for that matter. It's what works for your team, because each team is a unique combination of individuals. And so it's having that conversation. And that's, again, draws back into the role of the leader. The role of the leader is to facilitate these kind of conversations, to make sure these things are in place, not to actually do it all, not to always organise it. It's about facilitating it, making sure it happens. And that takes time. And that's where this kind of whole thing around leadership, leaders need to be even more aspirational, even more kind of clear and direct, and communicate even more than we did when we were in the physical workspace. But we've got to make sure that when we are communicating, we're communicating in the right type of way for our team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not your team for my team, and you for your team, kind of thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder whether what you're saying as well, would invite reflection on, let's say you work on your own, you're part of much smaller micro business, then would you actually suggest that you could still replicate that by reaching out to other entrepreneurs and other micro businesses and create, that connection?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, not everybody is appreciate that, but a lot of people attend some form of network. Now, that might be a business kind of network, or it may be a professional network. Within my world, our professional organisation, we have various networks all set up at different times of day. Some of them are in the evening. So there's something there for everybody. And yes, some of them are a bit more formal, but they also organise informal ones. So it's finding something local. And if there's something there, then you will know other local business people, other local entrepreneurs. Contact them, reach out to them and say, I'm really struggling. I find it very lonely, kind of being working at home all the time on my own. Now we can't get out and about so much. Are you finding a similar thing? And if they say yes, then suggest that you organise something there and build up a network of your own. It's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about something in particular, if you don't mind. A few weeks, if not months ago, you published this video on LinkedIn, you know which one I'm going to mention, where you talked about how to cope better, and you were demonstrating how to use Post-it notes. Do you remember that
Yep,
video?
yep, I do
So,
indeed.
and I must tell you, I think it was not the algorithm, it was just, luck, I would imagine, but the day and I saw the video was perfect time, because I was feeling a little overwhelmed, and I was finding out, that I couldn't go to France, and as you're doing things, and then here you are on LinkedIn, doing demonstration with Post-it, which essentially I have with me all the time. So would you mind talking us through how you came up with the idea of the video and the content of the video?
Yeah, it's just one of the. I have, again, through networks and talking to my clients, etc. We know people are struggling, and one of the things is people. There's lots of ideas, there's lots of tools and strategies out there, and a lot of them can take up an awful lot of time, and they're not that simple and easy to remember. And I like things that are quick and simple and easy but effective. And the Post-it idea was one way that I came up with, thinking, how can I get people? Because when I'm in a workshop, we'll kind of do whatever we're doing. I'll say, okay, let's make your action plan, write an action plan. And so, yeah, okay, they write one or two things. That action plan stays at the back of that workbook. It's never going to see light of day again. So I wanted to do something that was different, that people actually would do something a bit more with. So we came up with a Post-it idea. And quite simply, the idea is, if you are feeling stressed, a bit overwhelmed, whatever, grab yourself a set of Post-it notes, just download whatever's thoughts are going through your mind, all the things that are creating that stress for you at the moment, and just write it all down. One stressor, as we call them, or stress triggers, per Post-it note. And keep going. You can use a whole pad of Post-it notes if you really need to. That's fine. One idea per Post-it note. When you've downloaded everything out of your mind, first of all, you'll probably feel a lot better for just getting it out of your mind, first of all. But then go back to the Post-it notes and one by one go through them. Read what you've put on the Post-it note, and then turn it over and write just one thing that you personally can do. You're not having to rely on anybody else. one thing that you personally can do that day or the next day, within the next couple of days, that you can do to actually reduce the impact of that stress. There will be some things that you say, do you know what, they're just way out of my control. There's nothing I can do about that. So you just have to put those to one side, and then we just have to let them go, accept we cannot do anything about them, and it's not helping us to keep worrying about it. We can't do anything, so just let those ideas go and focus on the things that you can do something about. And at the end of it, you'll have however many post-it notes. It might be half a dozen post-it notes, it might be a dozen post-it notes, but you have got an action, something that you know you've said you can do it in the next few days that can actually help you better manage the stress it's creating for you. And so it's a very simple, easy way. You can do it anywhere. You know, you can sit at your desk and do it. You can sit downstairs and do it, wherever you want to kind of do it. Just sit and do it. And it's a great way, and you feel just so much better, because what you're actually doing, you're taking back control. Because one of the big things, when we are feeling stress, we start to feel out of control, and that everything's just piling up on top of us. We start to feel overwhelmed by it. And again, our emotional brain kicks in, and our logical, rational brain isn't working. And this process helps you to bring back that rational, logical thinking brain that'll help you sort you through your problems. And at the end of it, you've got an action plan. You feel so much better. You're now in control. And off you go.
Yeah, that reminds me of someone that's saying as well that, we have a tendency, all of us, to try and store and memorize, things as opposed to write them down. So of course, what you have to do then, if you want to memorize, you have to go through that information over and over again for fear of forgetting it. So actually writing it down is better. But it feels almost, that you're saying is that the more kind of complex it feels or seems, the simpler the solution you should adopt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Simplicity is always the key. The brain has a very simple organizing principle. It's either a potential threat or a potential reward. Every single piece of information that is received in the brain gets simply, very quickly filed reward or threat. And unfortunately, because of the current situation, we're getting far too many threats and not enough potential rewards. And so we're all feeling much more stressed and out of control, that somebody else is in control of it. And even when we really do feel totally stressed, overwhelmed, and that, it's all the government's fault, that whatever is happening to us, or our employer's fault, or whatever, there's nothing at all that we can do. Actually, there is always something that we can do. We can take some form of control, just take back control. And it's about finding those simple little things. It's about creating certainty as well, because again, the brain likes certainty. And when it doesn't get that certainty, then it creates stress. And so it's finding certainty. And you can say, well, all we ever hear about in the press these days is we're in an uncertain world. Everything's uncertain. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know when there's a vaccine coming, etc., etc. And it's full of uncertainty. But what can we be certain of? Well, we can be certain that in however many days, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, it's going to be Christmas Day. There are things we can be certain of. We can be certain that in 12 hours' time, it's going to be 20 to 1 in the morning kind of thing. They're silly things, I know, but, there's things that we can be certain of. And it's about actually, if your focus is on the kind of the long term, it's the fact, that you're not going to be able to have those summer holidays or whatever. Try bringing it in closer to you. What can you be sure of in the next few hours, weeks, or days or weeks kind of thing? Don't worry too much about always looking really long term. On the other hand, if something is in the more immediate that's causing you the stress, then it might actually serve you better to start to try and think about, well, actually, okay, the next few weeks are going to be a bit bumpy. We're in tier 3, let's say, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. But, in the longer term, this is what's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a guest who used the expression change the storytelling, and change the story you tell yourself. Can I ask then, because I think you're hinting about this idea of resilience and adapting. In the work that you do, if I could actually take advantage of you joining me today on the Content Marketing Studio, any other kind of tactics or strategies that you're aware of that has worked well for your clients around increasing your ability to adapt and be more resilient?
Um, I think the key to resilience is looking after it. It comes back in a nutshell to that kindness, that compassion for yourself. And there are 8 things that we actually call the healthy brain toolkit. And they, first of all, sleep. Sleep is just so important. Making sure that you get, on average, 7 to 9 hours sleep, and good quality sleep as well. That is just so key. And if we don't get that sleep, it actually impacts on our, okay, we get up next morning, we're irritable, etc. But actually, it does impact on our health because it affects our immune system, for example. So sleep is really kind of key for that. And if you find that you are struggling, because again, when we're stressed, it can be more difficult to get to sleep. Some of the things is make sure that your bedroom is quite cool, not cold, but not warm either. It needs to be cool, actually, the bedroom. A very good idea, little tip I picked up a while ago was have a shower before you go to bed. Because when we start to fall to sleep, our bodies naturally cool down. If you get in the shower, you're naturally warming the body up. But then as your body starts to cool down from the shower, you start to feel sleepy. So having a shower just before you go to bed is a really good idea. Things like the usual things, not watching TV, not drinking alcohol, caffeine for an hour or so before you go to bed is important. But also the kind of, we know about the effects of blue light, and we shouldn't be having our mobile phones on laptops and TVs and things like that in the bedroom. But there is actually research that shows just having a mobile phone, even if it's switched off in the bedroom, does interfere with our natural sleep patterns. So try and keep all technology out of the bedroom. Make sure that you go to, when the bedroom is literally, it's for sleeping. Make sure,
Oh,
again, nice.
this is hard. I mean, how am I going to watch my best series on Amazon Prime?
Can't. Sorry, gone. You have to watch those downstairs on the TV or on your laptop, whatever. You have to watch those, but not in the bedroom.
All right, I'll try.
So it's a case of, it's that mental kind of training. It's about setting a bedtime routine that works for you, basically. So sleep is one of the kind of key ingredients. Obviously, eating good, healthy food, a healthy diet, exercise, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is recommended. Socializing, that's another thing that is important. And again, because we can't, and depending what tier people are in and things like that, people can't always visit other people as easily nowadays, but find different ways of socializing, make that effort. And again, when we're feeling a little bit stressed, one of the challenges can be that we feel, oh, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. I really should ring Pascal. I'll do it tomorrow. I don't feel I can be bothered today. And unfortunately, we get into a spiral, a downward spiral. So it's making that extra effort to make sure that you do reach out to somebody. Relaxation. So again, that's that kind of being compassionate. Even if you are, a busy mum and you have got an awful lot going on and you're looking after the family, etc., it's making sure you build in some me time, even if it's just 20 minutes a day or 20 minutes 3 times a week if you can't manage it every day. Reflection is another part of the Healthy Mind Toolkit, and that's really, just a few minutes before you kind of fall asleep, just sitting and thinking back. And one of the things I actually like to do with the reflection is to actually have a journal, and I try and write down at least one thing every day that I am grateful for, something that I've appreciated. It might be a client has given me some really nice feedback, or I've heard something that they've done as a result of attending one of the workshops, but anything. And if I'm really, really struggling, I always know that there's my dog I can fall back on. And it's just that, the way that he just stands and looks at me sometimes. So you can always write something down. The advantage for me of having it written down is that in those down times when I perhaps am feeling a little bit down and need something to pick me back up, and go back to that gratitude journal, read through it, and I feel, I have got a lot to be grateful for. Another one is focus, making sure that we do our minds are naturally wandering organs. They're naturally inquisitive. And the fact that we all lead such busy lives and we try and multitask, we're actually training our brains to be even less focused than they are naturally. And what that means is then when you need to actually focus on get that blog post done, and you need to really focus on it, actually, you find it even harder to do that because you've trained your brain not to focus. The fact that you're going to find it struggling with the blog post creates stress. So you start feeling stressed and we're back into the cycle. So actually just spending some time focusing the mind, and a very easy way of doing this. I mean, some people, yes, if you are open for it, then mindfulness is by far the best way. Some mindful meditation. I have a regular practice myself. I do at least 20 to 40 minutes every day. And it works for me. It's not for everybody, but a very simple way I introduce it in workshops is I just say to people, right, okay, I just want you to sit. I don't want you to write any of this down, but I just want you to sit, and I want you to think of 5 things that you can actually see right now. And I give them a few minutes to do that. And then I say 4 things that you can smell right now, 3 things that you can actually touch, 2 things you can hear, and 1 thing that you can taste. And just by getting them to do that, and obviously giving them a few seconds each or a few minutes each time to do that, I'm actually making them focus. And that's a very simple activity people can do to help them develop that focus. And so then when they do, if they do, obviously not doing it once is going to make much difference, but if they do that kind of thing on a regular basis, when they do need to write that blog post, they can actually focus. They can cut other things out around them and focus on doing it. And so that's another great little thing you can do. And the last thing is not forget to have fun. Fun is so important, whatever is fun for you. So it might be a hobby, it might be even linking into exercise. You might enjoy taking your dog out for a walk or something like that. Whatever it is that actually makes you happy, that you can just have some fun, just let your hair down, become a child again, maybe do a jigsaw, something like that, whatever. Yeah, and those are the key ingredients. The other thing is about for resilience, and it links into that focus, it's about being actually present, catching yourself being present, because as I say, our mind is a naturally wandering mind, and 49% of our waking hours, our mind isn't present on what we're doing. So if you are trying to do that blog post, 49%, half of the time basically that we are working, our mind isn't actually focused on what we're actually working on. It's actually jumping forward to think about all the other things on the to-do list we've got to do, or worrying about something that we've already done, and was it good enough, and what will they think about it, etc., etc. And again, all that is doing is creating stress. Stress does not exist in the present moment by moment. But as soon as we start to let the mind run forward to think, I've got to get this blog post done because I've still got this, and this to do, that's when we start to get the stress. So again, spending more time in the present moment. I said earlier about accepting what you cannot change and just letting it go. That again is another big part of resilience. Just being able to, I have a colleague, and when she talks about it, she talks about dropping the bone. And if we're having a conversation, or if we're doing a project, working together or something like that, and I'm not actually letting things go, she'll just say, Michelle, drop the bone. And I know instantly what she means. And so for me, that kind of image of I'm into dogs. So I have this image in my head of dogs, my dog sitting there with a great big bone in his mouth kind of thing. And so drop the bone. So that's the other thing to kind of do. Yeah. So those were
Wow.
my main tips.
No, thank you so much. It's an important reminder because with everything that, excuse me, we've gone through, it's easy to forget, or it's easy to kind of just carry on, plow on, and
Yep.
dismiss. The other thing that I think people have done, I've been guilty of that, is you don't want to become an inconvenience to others. Or so if you're having a down day and you should ring your best mate, but you don't because you don't want to be an inconvenience.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You know,
it's
that has been an amazing insight, both into your work, but also in terms of the impact you have on your customers. May I say so, not bad at all for an introvert.
I'm going to lay down in a very
I,
dark
I
room
thought
for
you
the
might.
afternoon.
Hey,
No,
I feel so energized by this conversation as a true extrovert. So thank you very much for that. So
no, thank you.
before I let you go and make sure that we say thank you properly to you, I've got a bit of a fun quiz for you to take part in, if you don't mind.
Go on.
All right.
We'll try.
So, just this is a part of the stress-free brain activities that I'm going to offer you, where you just give me the answer that comes to mind. So, if you could have a Zoom call with a famous person, perhaps from the world of science, business, or entertainment, who would you be on the Zoom call with you?
If I could have I think I'd actually like a conversation with Carl Jung. Kind of because my work, a lot of my work is based. He's at the roots of that work. And I'd really like to sit down and get really inside his head, because one of the things I found was trying to, when I went back to study his work, because it all took place at the end of the 18th, early 19th century, and he wrote it all in German, and then it was translated into Old English, trying to actually understand that. Yeah, I think I have, and certainly what I understand is as much as kind of the other people out there, but I'd love to have a real conversation with him.
Oh, I'm sure, absolutely. Next question for you. If you could have your own private online concert, perhaps on Facebook Live, for you and the family, which band or artist would play for you?
Andre Rieu.
Really? Wow. Excellent.
Really, he is fantastic, and I actually use him as a bit of a kind of a business mentor in a way, because of the way that he treats his staff or his orchestra, the way that they're one big family, and there's no kind of hierarchy as such. For me, it's brilliant. I actually do adore his music as well. I've been to several of his concerts, and he's all Monday night tonight. He's on TV, so those kind of things. I've watched listened to his music, watch all his DVDs, concerts, etc., etc. So no, I would love him
Wow.
to have a private concert. Yes.
Fine choice, if I may say so. So, well, since you have the concert to enjoy, let's order some food. So, what food would you order for you and the family?
Oh dear. Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
Absolutely. Why not?
Yeah. Well, why not?
Mm,
Or I don't know. I always say one of the things that I'm very proud of is kind of my roots, my
of
heritage, and
course.
my parents and grandparents, and they were very, very traditional kind of people. And I always say to people, if somebody's not feeling very well, or if they're quite a sickly, what I could call a sickly type person, I'll say the trouble is they didn't have enough roast beef and Yorkshire pudding or stew and dumplings when they were young. So for me, they're my stable kind of foods.
Yeah, love it. I'm a converted, Frenchman. I love all the food from the northern part of England. So, if you could have your own radio show, what would you
Yeah.
talk about, and who would be your co-host?
Oh, co-host. I think my co-host would actually be the Jigsaw licensee, who's kind of a international partner, we call him, Russell from Ignite. He's based in Dubai, and he is the total opposite to me. He's extrovert, he's funny, He's brilliant. And again, we would tend to work really quite well together. So he would make a brilliant co-host, and what we would talk about the brain, behaviors, my passion. Yeah.
Ah, super. Finally, when all this is behind us and we can travel more freely, where would you like to go with you and the family?
It would be Dubai.
Hmm?
I love Dubai. Only been once and had an absolute fabulous 10 days out there. It was a business trip, but we extended it a little as well. And because we were on business, we got to see the real Dubai, not just the tourist places. So I think it's, yeah, definitely Dubai.
Excellent choice. Thank you very much. Well, listen, thank you for joining the Content Marketing Studio today. It's been really a pleasure to, for you to input into this Invest in Yourself mini series. For our viewers and listeners, if they have more questions about you and the jigsaw work that you do, where can they find out more about Michelle on the interweb?
You can look me up on LinkedIn for one thing. Michelle McArthur's on there. Michelle McArthur-Morgan, Jigsaw at Work, has got a page as well, and Jigsaw Discovery has got a page. Or the website is jigsaw80, the word at work.com.
Thank you so much. And to your viewers and listeners, thank you for your support. Please do leave your comments, feedback, and suggestions in the usual places. Until the next one, if you want to make sure your content is better and faster, start by being kind to yourselves. Thank you very much. Bye for now.